Hello, everybody. This is Lawrence, and I am back. This is episode 3 of the Blueprint for Life podcast, How to Fight Depression. If you caught the video earlier this week, you'll notice that I said that I was going to deal with a few things that were a bit more personal. I think that pretty much everybody can say that they either are someone or they know someone who has dealt with depression. That is something that is prevalent, not just here in the United States, but all around the world. It is something that we have dealt with, people have dealt with all over the world. And I don't think it's going away. Not in this current society, not in this world. So rather than pretending as if it doesn't exist, I think it's more important for us to find ways to cope, find ways to deal. And I think it's important that instead of just letting depression handle us, instead of being handled by your diagnosis, instead of being handled by this issue, you would be far better off. Even myself, I include myself in this. I would be far better off finding ways to deal with depression rather than being dealt with by depression. I was so happy to hear my pastor say on this past Sunday, because it's not something that you hear in the Christian church very often, to acknowledge just how important it is for the church to truly acknowledge the existence of depression, the importance of dealing with depression within the church, and also let's be honest, the simple fact of the matter that we can't just say that, oh, depression doesn't really exist. If you're wrestling with depression, maybe you just need a closer relationship with God. The reality is that we have who we would consider heroes of the faith that were written about in scripture that wrestled with depression. So let's be realistic about this thing, people. Depression is not something that we should be trying to sweep under the proverbial rug, but it's something that we should be looking proactively for ways to deal with. Being mindful that this is something that has touched so many people all around the world. And if we're not careful, it can permanently damage and harm so many more people. Not just the one who is wrestling with it, but family members around them. So without further ado, I want to jump right into the meat of the topic. And I hope and pray that you'll ride with me on this. All right. So let's go. First of all, depression. And I'm grateful that I have family members who are kind of on the front lines battling this thing. I've got a family member who is a wonderful therapist, and she's not my therapist, but I was able to pick her brain on this. And she pointed out to me that, you can't just toss everything all in the same pot and call it a meal. She told me that, you have to be mindful that you can't just call everything under the same umbrella depression, but that, it's called major depression. So if she's listening, shout out, much love to you. But major depression is one of the most common mental disorders in the United States. All right. And it's marked by a period of at least 2 weeks. All right. I want to point that out. At least 2 weeks when a person is experiencing a depressed mood and they have a loss of interest or pleasure in daily activities, and they have a majority of specified symptoms such as problems with sleep, eating, energy, concentration, or self-worth. All right. So That is essentially what makes up a major depression episode. So you can have what is considered multiple major depressive episodes over the course of a year, and these all kind of tie into depression. So I think it's important to understand kind of the intricacies that go into, what we understand as depression. Not all people who have been diagnosed with depression are depressed all the time. Okay? Just because you have this diagnosis of depression doesn't mean you can't have good days. Doesn't mean that, people who have been diagnosed with depression are mopey all the time. I know people who have been diagnosed with depression who have good days, who go out and enjoy themselves and smile and laugh and have fun. But then there are occasions where they don't feel so hot and they can't completely understand or explain why they don't feel the best, why they can't seem to find their smile, can't seem to find their happiness or their joy, and they seem to feel like they're a burden on the people that are around them, and they can't concentrate, and they don't really have an appetite, and they either want to sleep all the time or they just can't find a way to get to sleep, and they've got zero energy. These are episodes of major depression, but just because they're having episodes of major depression does not mean that they are depressed all the time. Okay? The sun does come out sometimes. All right? But just to give a few statistics, all right, so that we can get a few of these things out of the way. And I'm diving back a couple of years now, but these were the stats that I was able to find. And if you look for yourselves, I looked on the websites for the National Institute for Mental Health and for the World Health Organization, and these were the stats that I was able to find. 21 million adults in the United States, and this is for 2021. 21 million adults in the United States, and this is 18 plus, dealt with at least one episode of major depression in these United States. That's 8.3% of all adults in the United States. 21 million adults in the United States in 2021. And again, remember, this is everybody 18 plus, all right? Now, out of that number, 10.3% of them were female. Women had the highest percentage of that number in 2021. 10.3% were female, 6.2% were male. All right. Now, breaking that demographic further down, 18.6% were in the 18 to 25 age range. 18.6% were in the 18 to 25 age range. And 13.9% were of mixed race. So out of that 21 million adults, 13.9% were of mixed race. And then 14.5 million adults in the United States, in that 18 plus range, had severe impairment in 2021. That's 5.7% of all U.S. adults. That is a major block of people. Okay? But let's go down to the next bracket. 5 million adolescents, and this study looked at adolescents as 12 to 17-year-olds. Okay, so 5 million adults in the United States. That's 20.1% of the United States adolescent population had at least one major depressive episode in 2021. And the percentage was highest among females at 29.2% compared to males at 11.5%. Now, I'm not going to get into the specifics of I wonder why this happened and why it was higher among females versus males or anything. You can do your own independent research about this, but we're talking about today about how to fight depression. So I really want to just look at the numbers, okay? The percentage was highest among mixed race adolescents. Again, remember, 12 to 17-year-olds at 27.2%. All right? And 3.7 million adolescents had severe impairment in 2021. That's 14.7% of all U.S. adolescents in 2021. All right? And for a little bit of context, in 2021, adolescents 12 to 17 numbered approximately 25.8 million. Okay? So out of that 25.8 million, 5 million of them, a whole fifth of them, had some sort of major depressive episode. And then the adult population numbered approximately 258.3 million. And out of that, 21 million of them had some sort of major depressive episode. We're talking almost 10% of the adult population that had some sort of major depressive episode in 2021. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. And you kind of have to wonder, like, okay, what's going on here? Like, why is this such a prevalent issue? And I don't have that answer. I promise you I don't. I battle with it just like the rest of the 20 some odd million. But then let's look to the word, because again, this is blueprint for life. And I'm a firm believer that God has designs on our lives. He has a blueprint whereby he has already set aside plans and purpose for our lives so that we can live our best life. Not just a life, but our best life. So let's look at some people who had some issues with depression. And these are going to be some folks that their names might ring some bells. Whether you're familiar with the Bible or not, you may have heard these names before. Okay? We got a guy by the name of Job. Now, the Bible doesn't give an exact timeline of Job's suffering, okay? But it does tell us about what he went through. And Job was a guy that even God boasted about. You know, when he was talking to Satan and he said, you know, have you considered my servant Job, who's perfect and upright? You know, Job was a guy who did, I won't say everything right, but he did enough that God noticed his faithfulness. And he did what he was supposed to do. And yet, Job lost everything. He lost all of his wealth, because in that time, your wealth was tied up in what you owned, all of his cattle, all of his sheep, all of that was his wealth, his land, everything. He lost all of it. His children, all of them were killed. And he even lost his wife. Like, his wife flipped on him. Who wouldn't become depressed after something like that? Like, who doesn't manage to end up being a little bent out of shape, if I can use that term, after going through something like that? But then if you look at Job, the 7th chapter, 1st through the 10th verse, you really get a sense of just how bad Job was feeling. Like Job says in the 7th chapter, 1st through the 10th verse, it says, "Isn't slavery everyone's condition on earth? Our days like those of a hired worker? Like a slave, we pant for a shadow, await our task like a hired worker. So I have inherited months of emptiness. Nights of toil have been measured out for me. If I lie down and think, when will I get up? Night drags on, and restless thoughts fill me until dawn. My flesh is covered with worms and crusted earth. My skin hardens and oozes. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. They reach their end without hope. Remember that my life is when my eyes won't see pleasure again. The eye that sees me now will no longer look on me. Your eyes will be on me and I won't exist. A cloud breaks apart and moves on, like the one who descends to the grave and won't rise, won't return home again, won't be recognized in town anymore." This is the words of a man who has suffered, who doesn't even understand what the next moment is going to look like for him. Here's the man who had everything he could have wanted and is fallen so low that he is suffering in the depths of depression. The Bible doesn't hide this kind of stuff from us. The Bible talks about, what it's like to fall into depression. It's amazing to me that people would talk about the Bible sometimes that, as if it's this book that pretties up our living situation and, wants to put the best of everything forward. When the reality of it is, the Bible actually deals with the dirtiest parts of humanity and teaches us how to deal with it. But don't get me started on that. Anyway, what about David? David was referred to by God as a man after his own heart. And even he wasn't exempt from depression. The book of Psalms is full of songs that were written by David when he was crying out to God from the depths of his brokenness. David did some things, went through some things, and there are many accounts of when David fell before God and was crying out, broken, shattered, crushed before God, utterly depressed, trying to understand how he got to the place that he was in and crying out to God to either pull him back up or just go ahead and finish me off. You even have Elijah. Now see, Elijah, he was a powerful prophet. At one point, he called down fire from heaven to consume a sacrifice and an altar that both of them had been completely soaked in water. He stood up to King Ahab and had killed over 400 evil priests and prophets in an epic showdown. And then he also became so depressed that in 1 Kings, the 19th chapter, 4th verse, he told God that he had had enough and asked him to kill him. And then you have Judas, old Judas Iscariot. Judas was the treasurer of Jesus' ministry, and according to John, the 12th chapter, 6th verse, he was also a thief. Now, some scholars believe that it was Judas' belief that Jesus was going to set up an earthly kingdom, and Judas was trying to set himself up so that he could get some kind of influential position within Jesus' cabinet when he finally set himself up as King of the Jews. And that when that failed to manifest itself, when that failed to happen, Judas got, kind of got upset, and that's when he decided to sell Jesus out. But then when he finally realized, after he had then sold him out and took those 30 coins, when he finally realized what he had actually done, the weight of what he had done caused him to fall into this pit of desperation and despair and depression that it caused him to take his own life. And that was a truly regrettable decision. And then we have Jesus. Now, everybody thinks that, Jesus, he was so far above concerns like depression. But that's false. Because, see, while Jesus is fully God and fully man, his being fully man is what allowed him to be completely encompassing and fulfilling of both aspects. Okay, his godhood may have been above it all, but his manhood or his personhood allowed him to fully experience what it means to be human. While he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he struggled mentally and emotionally with what he was about to endure. There's no way he didn't know. So he even went so far as to pray and ask if there was another way. And the stress and the anxiety and depression was so great that it brought on a case of hematohydrosis. And it literally caused him to sweat blood. These are 5 people that we would consider heroes in their own right. That overcame incredible odds, overcame incredible circumstances to do things that we would say we're incapable of. And yet they must be larger than life. Nah. If they can do it, we can do it. But I want to give you a couple of scriptures that will prayerfully give you the encouragement that you need, and encouragement that I find that can help to propel you forward when you sometimes feel like you want to quit. Philippians, the 4th chapter, 6th and 7th verse says, "Don't be anxious about anything. Rather, bring up all of your requests to God in your prayers and petitions, along with giving thanks. Then the peace of God that exceeds all understanding will keep your hearts and minds safe in Christ Jesus." Okay, see, I just want to point out that it is very difficult to dwell on what you don't have when you're being thankful for what you do have. It's very difficult to dwell in the loss when you're being thankful for what you have. Sure, we can always ask for what we have need of. The Bible tells us to ask for what we have need of. But in the midst of that, be thankful for what God has already done. Be thankful for what he's already blessed you with. If you can go to God with a spirit of thankfulness and a spirit of gratefulness and telling him thank you for what you've already done, then you'll find it increasingly difficult to dwell on the things that you're struggling with, the things that you maybe don't necessarily have at the moment. You'll find it harder to focus on what you might be wrestling with. Matthew, the 6th chapter, 25th and 26th verse says, "Therefore I say to you, don't worry about your life, what you'll eat or what you'll drink, or about your body, what you'll wear. Isn't life more than food and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds in the sky. They don't sow seed or harvest grain or gather crops into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Aren't you worth much more than they are?" Sometimes I think it's about perspective, about seeing ourselves the way God sees us. You know, if we were able to get a proper perspective of what it is or how it is that God sees us, then I think we would have a better understanding of what it is that, or where it is that we stand in his sight. You see, he went out of his way to make us. It wasn't like this was accidental. He went out of his way to make us. And as a result, we're special to him. We're incredibly special to him. And because of that specialness, because of that relationship that we have with God, he goes out of his way to provide for us. So don't freak out just because you don't necessarily see how you're going to make it or how you're going to provide. Continue to be a good steward over what you do have, and let him take care of the rest. Be obedient to what he's told you to do, and let him handle the rest. Stop freaking out about what looks like a shortfall to you, and let him handle the miracles. And if we look at Psalms, the 55th chapter, or rather the 55th division of the book of Psalms, 22nd verse, says, "Cast your burden on the Lord. He will support you. God will never let the righteous be shaken." You know, one of the greatest things that I remember from my childhood is never having to worry about anything. My parents always told me that my job was very simple. All I had to take care of were the chores that they gave me and my schoolwork. Those were the only things that I was really truly responsible for. Everything else was what they were responsible for. And even with the chores and the schoolwork, if I ran into any difficulties, I could just ask for help. So I really wasn't truly responsible for anything. God has promised us that he will take care of everything. All we have to do is rely on him. Isn't that a great feeling? Isn't that a wonderful feeling? To know that regardless of our circumstances, regardless of our worries, that we don't really have to worry about anything. So ultimately, I believe that the way that we fight depression is to change our perspective on what we're really up against. We're not in this fight by ourselves. We don't really have to fight this battle by ourselves. Rather, give it over to God. Let Him take care of it. Let Him fight our battles. Stop struggling against battles that are too big for us. And instead, let Him take care of it all. Look, guys, I'm glad that you've been with me for this entire time. And I hope and pray that something that I've said has helped you to move forward and move beyond where you are. And I pray that if anybody is struggling with depression, that you reach out to someone. Reach out and get help. If you or anyone that you know is wrestling with thoughts of suicide, please reach out, get help. Dial 988. There's always someone that is willing to listen to you there. Promise you, taking your own life is not the solution. Hold on for just a little while longer. There are people around you who love you and want to see you do your utter best, who want to see you live your best life. Hold on. As always, I'll continue to pray for you, with you. If you desire someone to pray with you, just reach out into the comments, and I'll be more than happy to do just that. God bless. Love you all.